Every NBA offseason, we have to evaluate who's next. What are the stars that are going to be looking to move, to change teams, to really shake things up in the league? And in this moment, there are a lot of guys that you really need to be keeping an eye on because their time with their current team might be up pretty soon. As you might have guessed by the thumbnail, we're going to begin with Luka in Dallas. Now, I think that this is not only the most interesting, but the most perilous situation of any of the players, any of the teams that we're going to talk about in this video, because if there's any guy that we're going to talk about that I'm most convinced would actually either request a trade or leave in free agency, I think that guy is Luka. There's a little bit of animosity here, it feels like, with the team, given the fact that they did already have to get rid of a coach. Now they're on a new coach. That already just kind of introduces a little bit of a weird feeling. There's been a lack of success in the postseason, and the only success that they've had in the postseason has been because how incredible Luka was. It wasn't like he was getting a ton of help. There's been some issues in the front office in terms of losing guys like Jalen Brunson. Then you bring in Kyrie, and this guy's a 2026 free agent. Right now, that seems like it's pretty far away, but really in, superstar trade request territory, that's not that far away. Luka's not that far away from being able to use that as a leverage opportunity to push himself somewhere else. And if you want to go down the list and check all the boxes of what normally happens when a player or superstar requests a trade, you're looking at roster mismanagement, you're looking at a lack of success relative to how good that player is individually, and you're looking at other opportunities around the league. And I think there are plenty of places, New York being one, as you saw in the thumbnail, that are going to be lining up their assets and or their cap space to try and bring in Luka, because you can think whatever you want to about him as a defender, as a guy that maybe doesn't play very well on both ends of the floor, as someone that, maybe you think is a little bit selfish as an offensive player, maybe you think that he was the reason that the Mavs got rid of Carlisle in the first place, he's a little bit of a diva. You can think all those things, but we know that all 29 other teams in the league, if they have the opportunity to get Luka, they're going to do it. And so if they start to get that feeling, they start to get those rumors that maybe he's looking elsewhere, that's someone to continue to keep an eye on. And if you're making a list of possible superstars to request a trade to be moved somewhere else, Luka's at the top of that list, I think. Continuing with the theme of the thumbnail, Joel Embiid is incredibly interesting to me because a lot of the stuff that I just talked about with Luka is also kind of present for Embiid. Not necessarily on the same level. Like, Philly, especially since they brought in Daryl Morey, has done a better job with the roster, and they've had opportunities in the postseason. A lot of the reason they haven't been as successful is because Embiid has either been hurt and or not as productive as you'd like for him to be relative to his regular season stats in the postseason. So a lot of that stuff is still there, but the big counterpoint for Embiid, and the reason that I don't think he's as high up on this list as Luka, is because it's clear that there is a strong connection between him and the franchise and the fan base. And it would be a massive betrayal if Embiid did decide to either request a trade or leave in free agency again as a 2026 free agent, just like Luka. Yes, I understand that he wants to win the title. I understand that he wants to have more postseason success, but he is as beloved by his individual fan base as pretty much any fan base in the entire league. And it would be a massive deal if he stepped outside of that and decided he wanted to leave. The reason he would do it, though, is if he has some self-awareness and some understanding that the injury issues are going to pile up, and you're a bigger guy, your prime is not going to last as long as a lot of these other players around the league, especially when you've been hurt as much as you have been, and your window to be an MVP caliber player, to push your team towards a championship, to be the focal point of that championship team, might be closing. And so you might want to go somewhere else where you can pair up with a true superstar. Him and Luka both have never really played with someone that's on that top tier all-NBA, second team, first team level. Embiid's played with Simmons, who made an all-NBA team. He's played with Harden, who made an all-NBA team, plenty of all-NBA teams throughout his career. But both of those guys either weren't great fits in Simmons' case or were diminished versions of what they were in Harden's case. And so if he really has an opportunity, potentially with Luka, to go team up with him in New York or a variety of different places, that's an opportunity I think more and more is going to look intriguing to him, despite the obvious loyalty that he has to the fan base. Next up is one you might not be expecting because they just got moved already, and that's Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland. Just a year ago, he ends up getting traded from Utah to Cleveland because they kind of want to reset their situation. Maybe they're not confident that he's locked in on staying with the team long term, especially through a rebuild as they traded Rudy Gobert. But for Cleveland, this already to me is getting a little concerning. You give up all this stuff. You basically gave up everything that you could while keeping your core intact in order to get Donovan Mitchell, and you don't even win a playoff series. And you don't look particularly competitive in the playoff series that you lose. And as a 2025 free agent, which again is not that far away, there's constant pressure on you if you're Cleveland, which they know very, very well with the LeBron era. There's constant pressure on you to make sure you're having postseason success, to make sure that you're putting this guy, Donovan Mitchell, an all-NBA caliber player, in position to compete for titles. And if you're not doing that, especially if you're in a market like Cleveland and New York or Miami or LA, and all these other teams are kind of, calling to Donovan Mitchell as, hey, maybe you should go here. Maybe you should team up with this star, that star. You've got a nice defensive infrastructure in the front court between Mobley and Allen and a backcourt partner in Darius Garland, but none of those guys are considered, top 15 players in the league. Donovan Mitchell, borderline top 15 guy in the league. Maybe he wants to go pair up with another one of those guys. And again, just because you traded all this stuff as Cleveland, and just because, he's already been moved once, doesn't mean that he necessarily holds any loyalty to the Cavs in the first place. And if he has an opportunity to go somewhere else, whether it be in 2025 free agency or leverage that beforehand, if Cleveland isn't as successful as they want to be in the postseason this upcoming season, we're going to continue to see those rumors. And just because he just got there doesn't mean that he's not going to ask out again. Next up is a guy that I'm sure a lot of you are waiting to see on this list, and that is Jalen Brown with Boston. Now, we've talked about, as I will continue to talk about throughout the offseason, the possibility of him going to a couple of different situations and the reasons why Boston might not want to keep him. But he is, as clear of any player that we have on this list, a guy that maybe isn't super excited about remaining with their current team. Like, you kind of have to speculate on Luka and Embiid and Donovan Mitchell in terms of their happiness with their current team. There's not a lot of speculation needed here for Jalen Brown. I think it's pretty clear that he would be interested and open to at least going to a new team, and whether that team be Houston, whether it be in free agency a year from now if he doesn't sign the extension, whether that be, requesting a trade this offseason, Jalen Brown is going to constantly be rumored in terms of a guy that could possibly be on the move. And I'm not sure that it's even a bad idea for Boston, given sometimes how weird the fit is between him and Jason Tatum. And just like, it's hard because he was the best player in the finals against Golden State 2 seasons ago. But then in this most recent postseason, he was turning the ball over left and right. Not that good defensively. Maybe you could say he was hurt, but he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on as well. And last up, of course, Damian Lillard. We can't do a stars/superstars next going to be traded video without talking about Damian Lillard. He has to be included always. And as has been the case for what feels like a decade, it hasn't been, but it feels like it. It just comes down to whether or not Dame wants to leave. I don't think Portland is ever going to be in the scenario where they're going to go to Damian Lillard and say, hey, we appreciate your loyalty, but we're going to move on from this era. We're going to explore trading you whether you like it or not. I don't think they're ever going to do that. It's a 0% chance. And if they really want to explore trading Dame, they're going to wait on the go ahead from him. As long as he still wants to be there, they're going to build around him. However, if Dame does end up going to Portland, I think it's almost an immediate, okay, cool, let's make it happen. I don't think they're going to fight it. I don't think they're going to push for his loyalty any longer. They've done everything they can to try and convince him to stay in terms of trying to compete when other teams wouldn't have, when other teams would have moved on, continuing to sign him to new contracts, giving him more and more money. They've tried to do all those different things. And I think at a certain point, if Dame does come to them and say, hey, you know what, I think I'd like to go to a different situation, at that point, things go into overdrive and we're looking at a ton of possible Damian Lillard trades. And you might not like it, but this is what I personally love about the NBA. I think it's one of the most interesting things about this league is you constantly have to be on your toes, not only as someone that covers the league, but as a team of making sure that your guy is happy all the time. This rings culture thing has created a situation where you have to constantly push for championship contention. And if you're not in one of those situations and or you're not with another great player, you're going to get left behind. And with the changing landscape in the NBA, with the new CBA rules and things like that coming up, teams are going to pay more and more attention to not only who the next guy is going to be, because you want to really prioritize 2 guys on your roster, but also making sure that you're constantly competitive, not maybe tanking as much as we've seen teams do in the past, because you always want to make sure that you're keeping your star, and in some cases on this list, superstars, happy.